The drug problem is currently considered one of the biggest problems that the countries of the world suffer from, and they are striving to combat it because of its serious damage to the health, social, economic, and security aspects. Unfortunately, it is no longer limited to individual cases that can be dealt with, but rather it has turned into a dangerous social phenomenon, and today it is necessary to raise alarm bells to take all means to combat this scourge. On the importance and seriousness of this issue, we are pleased to shed light on it through the psychological, social, as well as health aspect with our guest Khalifa Almutairi, addiction psychotherapist. Good morning, Mr. Khalifa, and we are really honored to have you with us in Good Morning Kuwait.
Good morning, thank you, and I applaud your efforts in tackling this issue head on instead of just sweeping it under a rug. So good job to you.
Thank you, dear. Definitely, we are really in the need for people like you, Mr. Khalifa, because honestly, this scourge and this huge disaster, hitting the youth of our, society. So psychologists, sociologists, and educators, as well as these those in charge of combating drugs, indicate that there are main reasons for the spread of the scourge of the times, which are drugs.
First of all, before I answer that question, you said we need people like me, but we also need people like you to spread awareness. So thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Great thanks to you.
Main factors, this is always the first question that I get asked when I'm talking about addiction. There are no main factors. There isn't. It's always a collection of factors, economic, social, environmental. But another factor that we don't pay enough attention to is, what do you think it is? Has nothing to do like mental health. Mental health. We don't pay enough attention to it. Economic, social, environmental, we always pay attention to it.
Yeah.
But mental health.
Okay, I see where you're going. Yeah, it has to be mentally. We have to address our mentalities.
But when I speak about mental health, it's that some personalities are much more prone to addiction, where impulsivity is a trait, such as borderline personality disorder, mood disorders, that also contributes. Some personalities are much more prone.
Amazing. So what are the most prominent factors, in your opinion, of drug spreading around in our Arab countries in particular?
In the Arab countries, do you mean? Yeah. In my opinion, from what I've seen in the hospital when treating patients that are young, it's always the lack of information. They always get into it for fun. They always get into it because it happens in a social environment and someone offers them, and they don't want to say no.
Exactly.
But they don't realize what our cravings, what our withdrawal symptoms. You'd be surprised by the amount of patients that I get that they don't even know what withdrawal symptoms are. I think that is one of the main factors in causing young people to get into addiction. But also another factor that I've noticed is that we care too much about reputation. Even though some people who are suffering from addiction in their home, they don't speak about it because they care too much about it.
You have to speak loud, to get at least some help and solution.
Exactly, they care too much about a reputation, to a point where they even send their sons and daughters abroad to get treated from addiction, even though we have free healthcare in Kuwait, free rehab.
I don't know, like poverty also has an effect, being a factor.
Of course it's a factor, but we also get people who own companies that also get into addiction. Addiction doesn't discriminate between poor and rich.
Poor and rich, yeah. But so there are rich people also addicted.
Of course.
So we see now the monitor, and we see these beautiful, some guiding lines. But let's move on, Mr. Khalifa. Addiction. Yeah, I see that's a nice painting. Honestly, pills. Wow, these needles. God forbid.
Of course.
Yeah. So there is no doubt that dealing with a drug addict is a very sensitive due to the health and social conditions related to addiction, but the society's view of the addict remains harsh, and even after his treatment is completed. What is the impact of society's negative view on the psyche of the addict and his family?
First of all, to say treatment is completed, and addiction treatment is never completed.
Never completed.
It's an ongoing process for the rest of their lives. Why do you think? Because the craving will always be there.
Okay.
Perfect. The craving will always be there for the rest of their lives. So treatment is never complete. It's an ongoing process.
But you off the air, you said we can minimize that craving.
That is what addiction treatment is all about.
Yeah.
It's that lowering the intensity of the craving to a point where it doesn't inhibit their ability to function everyday life.
Amazing.
That is what addiction treatment is.
So speaking of the society's point of view, the perception.
I mean, think about it from this way. If you come to work and you put in all the efforts to make your job, your role perfect, and you don't get praised or noticed about that, how are you going to feel?
Absolutely. Feel really bad and disappointed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So think about it from someone who's suffering from addiction and craving every day, and they really push themselves hard and to get into rehab, and then at the end of the rehab program, the society still views them as the same way. They'll think, what's the point?
Yeah,
Here I am
absolutely.
trying to better themselves.
Yeah.
What's the point? And
Yeah.
that ultimately will result in a relapse.
So definitely we need to change the perception of the society.
Of course.
Because this is, the addict is a patient.
Of course.
He suffers from a disease.
Of course.
So we have to treat him like that. So how can society be an open heaven for safety, urging the addict to rectitude and strengthening his resolve against the scourge of addiction?
What I've noticed in my experience since working at the addiction hospital is that there's too much focus on punishment.
Yeah.
Punishing them.
Yeah, punishing them.
But no, that's counterintuitive. You're not going to achieve anything. You're going to make it worse. You're going to make their case even worse. You need to focus on rehab. That's the solution, not punishment. You can punish them as much as you want. Even the families, the authorities, they punish them. But no, you need to provide them with a rehab program. That's the solution.
This is like, as I said, he's a patient.
Exactly. He's not a criminal.
Yeah, not a criminal.
He's not a bad person.
Yeah, you go to the drug dealer, you know, who's spreading these.
Of course,
that's
that's another case.
That's another case. But this young teenager, you know, he's a patient. We have to treat him, and you know, like this way, like any heart disease problem, or you know, somebody has a kidney problem, right?
Of course.
Correct?
I mean, growing up, what was your view about addiction or an addict? It's very negative, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's sitting on the corner of a street with a hoodie on, smoking, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's dirty.
Yeah.
But no, that's not the case.
everybody,
They're not a bad person.
Exactly.
They're not a bad person. They are just suffering from a disease, addiction.
And unfortunately, honestly, Mr. Khalifa, you know, the movie industry, you know, always picturing, you know, those druggies, you know, they are crackheads in the corners, you know, trying to, you know, like some scumbags and stuff like that. Yeah. And that's definitely not all the time the case, you know. Okay, there are some like that, but definitely not the case.
That's not the case. Yeah. And proof of that is that we have so many people who have gone through our rehab program, and now they're working. They are my colleagues. They work with me. They're not bad people. They just suffer from addiction.
Definitely. So given the seriousness of this deadly phenomenon for the youth of the country, and in order to preserve the most important components of society, namely the youth, what are the most prominent awareness programs offered to youth, families, as well as ways to raise alarm to combat this scourge?
I mean, nowadays what we're really focusing on is collaboration with other ministries. I believe maybe 2 weeks ago we had a lecture in the Special Forces Ministry of Interior where young men were just enlisted, and we're giving them a lecture about addiction and the harms of it, what are withdrawal symptoms, what are cravings, the long-term effects. So most of the outreach programs that we're offering now is in collaboration with other ministries. But regarding families, we always offer family therapy, family intervention at the hospital to help them, give them the information that they need in order how to manage and deal with someone in their house that is suffering from addiction.
So, on the basis of security and the law force, do you think they are good enough to like try to protect all Kuwait?
Of course, of course. Proof of that is that they're doing collaborations with us. This hasn't happened before. It's just happening now because they do care.
Yeah.
And regarding your question, if we're talking about catching traffickers, of course, every day in the news you see that every day they're catching people who are trafficking drugs through Kuwait.
Yeah.
And Kuwait is very a hub for drug trafficking. Why? Because it's in the middle. It's in the middle of all these countries.
Yeah, big countries.
So drugs are usually transported throughout Kuwait. But they're doing an excellent job.
That's really amazing. So, Mr. Khalifa Almutairi, honestly, I want to really ask you a lot of questions, but unfortunately we're out of time. Is there a message Mr. Khalifa Almutairi, the psychotherapist, wants to say to our viewers?
Of course, my message is that...
Or advice or whatever. Of
course, my message is that I know it's very hard to take that step to get into rehab because you care too much about reputation, but think of it from this perspective. Sooner or later, people are going to know. So would you rather your reputation be as an addict who is continuing on this addiction pathway, or someone who is an addict but seeking rehab and trying to better themselves? Which one? That's your decision to make.
So you urge everybody to forget the society, go save yourself.
Of course, be proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. Thank you very much,
Mr.
Khalifa Almutairi, and honestly, you enlightened us and and our viewers definitely. And God forbid, hope Allah protect our children and your children and everybody. And honestly, we ask forgiveness and healing for those addicts, definitely. Thank you very much, Khalifa Almutairi, psychotherapist of especially in addiction cases.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
The viewers will go for a break, and after that, definitely we'll have a closing for the program today.